Following is a production of Locked Up Sports.
Everybody, this is Don LaGreca from the Michael K. Show. When it comes to talking sports, Bob Walters and Brett Grasso are the authority.
Can't wait.
When it comes to talking sports, they're the authority. It's Bob Walters and Brett Grasso. It's Locked Up Sports, and it starts now.
Bring them out, hey. Bring them out, yeah. Bring them out, hey.
Here we go. Bob Walters from the Brian Gunzel Studios. This is Locked Up Sports. We got a big one for you here today. The Mets announced they're going to retire Darryl and Doc's numbers next season. Is public pressure putting Brian Cashman on the hot seat? We are joined by national baseball columnist and New York Times bestselling author Tim Brown to discuss his latest book, The Tao of the Backup Catcher. All that plus Frank Russo joins us to preview the U.S. Open. How you doing, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the show. I'm Bob Walters, and like I said, we got a jam-packed show for you here today. We got a whole bunch going on. We want to start real quick with Brett. Brett again is taking care of his father, as we said, doing what he needs to do. If you look in the comments in the description of the video here, we have a GoFundMe. Now, we don't ask you guys for anything ever. We never ask for anything. We just ask that you watch the show and enjoy the show. This time we're asking that you give us a couple bucks just to help Brett, just to help Brett's father. Anything helps. $1, $5, $10, $50, $500, whatever you want to give. You want to give 50 cents, whatever the lowest amount that GoFundMe will allow. Check it out in the description and in the comments. The link to the GoFundMe will be there. And listen, do the right thing. All right? Brett entertains us. He's a great guy. We love Brett. Do the right thing. Throw him a couple bucks to help out his father in his recovery process so we can get him back on the field and back walking the streets of Sayville where he belongs. So that's why Brett's not here today. As you know, like I said, no problem with that. We got a whole bunch going on today. We got Tim Brown, who a great spot. He was a great guest. You're going to love the interview. We get into everything about his new book. He's a New York Times bestselling author. His new book is The Tao of the Backup Catcher, Playing for the Love of the Game. He wrote it with Eric Kratz, who was a prototypical lifetime backup catcher. You'll see it right there above my right shoulder, right above the Locked Up Sports sign there in the background. But the Mets making news. I said we wouldn't talk about the Mets, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Mets because they announced yesterday that they next year will be retiring number 16 and number 18. So you will have 16, 17, and 18 retired from that 86 team. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as this guy's concerned, long overdue. Long overdue. Okay? They were the faces of the franchise in the mid-'80s. Darryl is still the franchise home run leader, 252 home runs. Doc still had the greatest pitching year, one of the greatest pitching years ever, the best in Mets history. Some will say DeGrom, but Doc's was better. Okay, Doc's was better in 85 and in 86. They were integral parts of the 86 team. I am glad that Steve Cohen is now doing this. And, you know, he put Hernandez in, he put the Gary and Keith in, and now, you know, Doc and Darryl belong up there. They belong to have their number retired. Nobody can wear number 18 and 16 for the Mets. Okay, you can't do that because those are hollowed numbers. And I get it, Yankee fans are going to make fun of us and say, well, you know, it cheapens it and this and that. But listen, Doc and Darryl deserve to have their numbers retired just as much as any other Met. And I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad Steve Cohen is finally honoring those years in that team as Hernandez went in, got his number retired this year. And well, actually it was last year. And then next year it's going to be Doc and it's going to be Darryl. Some people are also saying doing it to get butts in the seats because they're going to be bad next year. Listen, the Mets aren't going to be that bad next year. Okay, then they might not be a World Series contending team. They might not make the playoffs, but they're not going to be terrible. They're not terrible this year either. You know, there are bad teams. I know the Mets were bad this year, especially compared to what we thought we were going to get with that team. But they're not you know, a bottom 5 team. They're not a bottom feeder. In this little run they went on here in the last 2 weeks has really elevated them a little bit. So that's good news as far as the Mets go. The Yankees continue to lose. Listen, the Yankees are circling the drain with this season. Okay, they're 10 games, I believe, out of the wild card. They've lost 10 of 11. The only win they have is against the Nationals, the night when Judge hit 3 home runs. Other than that, the Yankees have done nothing. Severino, actually, believe it or not, Severino got the one win during this stretch, this 11-game stretch. And a lot of the talk and a lot of online and a lot of the chatter from Yankee fans are that they want Cashman out. Okay, and my question is public pressure getting to Hal? Do they hear it? Are they going to act on it? Because it's really loud. And Yankee fans are really... I've seen multiple polls where it's 75s, 80%, 68%, upper 60s to 85% in these polls want Cashman gone. Now, there's nothing official about the polls, but you got to think, does Hal maybe see this and say, maybe we just need to clean house? I think Boone is gone at the end of this year. I don't think Boone is going to come back. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I do think it's time for Cashman to go because... it's just been too long. It's 25 years. And I think that's part of it. I do think he's underappreciated, Brian Cashman, that is, by Yankee fans. He has been one of the top executives in the game the entire time he's been here. They did win a World Series. They've been in the playoffs every year. They are above 500 for over 30 years. They just had this 9-game losing streak, which 9 games, it's a long losing streak, but teams have 9-game losing streaks. The Yankees haven't had one in 41 years. So, no one's feeling bad for the Yankees, but who are you going to get? Are you going to be, do you have someone in mind? You can't just fire him. You got to look at the aftermath of it. Now, yeah, you could get rid of Cashman and it would be justified, and you could get rid of Boone and it would definitely be justified. Who are you going to bring in? What's the aftermath of that going to look like? Do you have anybody in mind? That's what you got to think of because, yeah, it'll feel good for a couple days. Got Cashman out of here. He was terrible. Those weren't even his World Series. The whole thing. You hear it all. But now who comes in? Because you got to realize that Cashman's a top 5 GM in the league. He's going to have another job in 2 weeks if you get rid of him. Boone will probably still get another manager job because Boone's done a decent job here. So that's what you got to think of. And I don't know. I know it leaked out a couple weeks ago that Brian Cashman was going to come back and that it was undecided if Boone was going to come back. I think Boone is done. Cashman, I just feel like, the public sentiment might be tipping the scales and maybe they just get rid of them both. And it'll be very interesting. I don't think the Yankees are going to be very good next year. They're stuck with this Judge 10-year contract now. I don't think they're going to go after Ohtani, which we'll get to in a minute. You got to think about what happens after you get rid of these guys. It'll feel good to get rid of them because, for some reason, Yankee fans hate them because, God forbid, they have one bad year. That's how fickle the Yankee fans are. As far as Ohtani, which I just mentioned, the Angels are coming to town this week. I'm actually going to the game Sunday. And, of course, it's just another disappointment. Really, the only thing the Mets fans had to look forward to at Citi Field these last, 6 or 8 weeks of the season was we had a nice series against a weekend series with the Angels, Trout, Ohtani coming in. Maybe Ohtani, maybe we could, cheer him into signing a contract with the Mets or whatever. Well, Ohtani is not going to pitch again the rest of the season. He has a tear in his UCL, his pitching arm. They took him out of the game with a fatigued arm. They did the MRI. It came up he had a tear in his UCL. He's done pitching. It's questionable whether he's going to play the field and play every day. If I was him, I wouldn't. This is now already going to affect the amount of money he's going to get in this offseason. He was looking at $500 million. He maybe not looking at that anymore. You got to think now with the future. Is he going to be a pitcher? How long is he going to be a pitcher and an everyday player? How long can he do that for? Is it going to be, he's not going to be able to do that for the entirety of this contract that he's going to get. He's going to get a 10, 12-year contract. Somebody out there is going to give it to him. It might be the Mets. It might be, it might be the Dodgers. And whoever gives it to him the last couple of years of any long contract just is terrible. Everybody wants to give these long contracts and they don't care and they don't want to talk about the back end of it. And then they give it to him. And then 5 years into the contract, if you haven't won a title and then he starts to decrease, now they start bitching and moaning. They did it with A-Rod. They're doing it right now with Stanton. They're going to do it with Judge, and whoever gets Ohtani is going to do it. But the story this week is neither of them are playing because Trout came off the IL for 1 day with the wrist injury. 1 day went right back on it, and it looks like both of them might be shut down for the season. As it's a monumental disaster for the Angels. The Angels made that call to go for it at the deadline rather than trade Ohtani and get back a bunch of pieces. They decided we're going to go for it, and within a week of that decision, their season was basically over. From the trade deadline, they lost 7 straight. They had a week worth of losses, and it was over just like that. And the Angels are probably the most disappointing story over the last 10 years. I mean, we speak about it in a minute with our guest. I speak about it with him and get his thoughts on it because he was Tim Brown. He was a national baseball columnist for Yahoo Sports. So we speak about it with him, and they're just snake bitten. I mean, to make that decision, that crucial decision for the future of your franchise, to go for it this year, and then just within a week, you lose 7 games and you're out of it just like that. And they've gone through a ton of GMs and everything like that. Jets and Giants tomorrow. Rodgers is going to take some snaps. Like I said, don't expect much from Rodgers. The word is they're going to limit his throwing. He just wants to get out there. I think he just is sick and tired of training camp. He wants to get out there, take some snaps, throw a couple passes. You're not going to see him for long. Two possessions, I would say max. If they get a couple first downs and the first possession is extended, you might just see him for the one. Because the Jets the Jets don't want to have this thing end in the third preseason game against the Giants. But then, next week we get going for real, and we're going to talk football. We will have football preview shows next week and everything going on. I'll talk about it with Mark Mancini on Tuesday. We'll do plenty of football, so don't worry about football. We also got the U.S. Open starting this week. I love the U.S. Open. I'm a big tennis fan. So we're going to preview that with Frank Russo. That's coming up a little bit later. So... a lot of little things going on. I want to get to the interviews, though, right now because, that's the best part of the show here. So here is my interview with Tim Brown, national baseball columnist, New York Times bestselling author. Enjoy the interview. All right, now we'd like to welcome in our guest for today. He spent over a quarter century covering Major League Baseball, 13 years as a national columnist at Yahoo Sports. He covered parts of 2 great sports dynasties, the Yankees of the late 90s and the Kobe and Shaq Lakers. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's got a new book out, The Tao of the Backup Catcher. His name is Tim Brown. Tim, how you doing?
Bob, I am so good, man. How are you?
I'm good. You got such a long list of accomplishments that the best-selling author comes at the end of it.
You know what that tells you is that I'm old.
Yeah, I know. Well, trust me, I know. I'm starting to feel it myself. When I watch these Hall of Fame inductions in football and baseball, and I see these players that were born 5 years after me going into the Hall of Fame.
Right.
That me starting to get old. I start to feel it. I really do.
And you start to think to yourself, what have I done?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I spent a lot of my time in jail because I'm a correctional officer on Rikers Island. So, I'm doing my time.
Right side of the bars anyway.
I'm on the right side. That's a good point. That's a good point. Now, I was just telling Tim, I got sent the book by the publisher. I read it in about a week or two. This was maybe 2 months ago. I liked it so much. I went out, I bought the hard copy. So I have one in my personal library in my New York apartment, but in my personal library, I got the hard copy. The Tao of the Backup Catcher. Where'd you come up with the title?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll go back to when I started thinking about a book like this, which was 30 years ago when I was a young guy trying to find my way on a baseball beat for the first time. Looking for people to educate me about the big league game. I mean, I knew baseball, but I didn't know what made a big league team run or not run for that matter. And so in my sort of search for knowledge, I kept finding myself at the foot of these backup catcher guys. And they were smart and they were humble and they saw the world. A lot of them were a bit older. And so as I worked my way through my career, again and again, I'd wind up in the corner of these clubhouses talking to backup catchers. And, I would often say stuff like, what are you reading these days? And it was always like The Alchemist or, something that was out there. And so I'm sort of carrying this information along with me. And 2018 comes along, and here's Erik Kratz, this like lifer backup catcher dude who'd never caught a break. And he's suddenly sort of the star of this really sort of sweet postseason run by the Brewers, a team that really very few people saw coming. They had some good players on that team, but suddenly walking into Game 7 of the NLCS against the Dodgers, and the guy that was sort of leading them was Erik Kratz. And I thought, gosh, here's another backup catcher. And I thought about his story, and it struck me that this is a guy who could carry a book about all of the backup catchers, about the culture of backup catchers. And so to get back to your question, to me, it was not really about baseball. The background was baseball. The characters were baseball players, but the message of this book was life. It was about humility. It was about showing up for the guy next to you. It was about kindness. It was about, look, Bob, we're all, you're on your journey. I'm on my journey. Everybody in the world is on their journey. And you don't always get to pick where that journey ends up, but you do get to choose who you are on that journey. And so for me, it's not about like how to be a backup catcher. It's about the way you conduct yourself. And so the Tao, I felt like it was sort of the spiritual process for me a little bit about sort of taking a look at my own life and how I treat people myself, and how you raise your kids and how you do your job and how you be where your feet are every day. And so that's a very long answer to a very short question and a very short word, but that's how I got there on that.
Yeah. I mean, he had a couple big hits in the series against the Rockies, if I remember correctly. That was his shining moment. And, he's your prototypical backup catcher. Erik Kratz is. He played with 1 million teams. He hit just over the Mendoza line. He's got, 100. He's a 100 RBI guy for his career, not a season, right. For his career. Right. And he's just your catchers are a different kind of animal. Even in like Little League, the catcher kind of stands out. It's you look at the team and you can pick out the catcher. I might not know who the first baseman is or who the third baseman is, but if you look at a photo of a Little League team, 8 times out of 10, you can probably pick out the catcher. They kind of stand out. So now, why catchers are not, let's say, lefty specialists?
Well, for one, you notice along the way, for example, 14 of the current 30 big league managers were either full-time or part-time backup catchers. There was something about this position that bred leaders, that bred the kind of guy who you sort of wanted to be like. And I think part of it also is that all the failure, right? We talk about failure in baseball. It's a game of failure. Well, you look around and, Mike Trout hasn't had a lot of failure. Shohei Ohtani.
He hasn't played in the playoffs. He hasn't played in the playoffs either, really.
Well, first he has to get there.
Yeah, I know. That's a whole other story. They got Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle, and they can't get to the playoffs.
Right. And so all the work they did, all the work, the work they do in the 21 hours around the game is unique, right? The left-handed reliever shows up at 4:00 and shags a little bit and then goes and sits in the bullpen and waits. But the backup catcher is constantly working, and it's not just at the ballpark where he's catching bullpen sessions and side sessions and riding on the bench and helping the starting pitcher or whoever's in the game, talking through what he's done. Post game, he's having a beer with a guy. He's being the father figure, the big brother, the therapist, the priest, all these things that that comes with being that guy, right? That veteran presence. Typically, sometimes you see younger guys as backup catchers, but it's become this sort of sage, almost Yoda type character.
Yeah, I mean it, and the catcher's like if I'm a starting second baseman or a starting right fielder or even a backup, you could kind of get away with being lazy. Just show up, get through on your athletic ability. The catcher can't do that. He might have the athletic ability, but if he doesn't know the hitters, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, the pitchers, what their pitchers are, their strengths and their weaknesses are, he's gonna look foolish out there. You can't get away with just your athletic ability. You have to study.
Right. I would even argue that the backup catcher, given enough time on a roster, and that's a big given sometimes, knows the pitching staff better than the number one catcher does, because not only, the number one catcher only catches these guys in a game. The backup catcher is the guy who on Wednesday afternoon at 2:00 is, it's 97 degrees out, and he's grinding through a bullpen session with a guy trying to find a slider or trying to locate his changeup better and talking through the mechanics of it, the thoughts of it, all these other things. He has the time to commit himself to that guy, especially, we talk a little bit in the book about personal catchers. It's the same sort of thing. The personal catcher is as committed to that start as the pitcher is, and a number one catcher can't. He's got all these other guys he's also committed to. So, yes, to your point, absolutely. I think that there's something special about these guys. Now,
Speaking of personal catchers, there's a good story in the book. As you can see, I'm a Mets fan, so it's a rough life. It's a rough life, all right. And I know you grew up a Mets fan, so you know part of it.
In White Plains.
Okay, but now there's a story involving R.A. Dickey, and was it Josh Tolley?
Josh Tolley, yeah.
I actually have right up here. I have Josh Tolley's nameplate from his locker. So tell the story about Dickey and Tolley, and it's interesting. It kind of made me feel bad, like not like Dickey as much, but it's a good story.
And I'll preface this by saying that the reason I told this story in the book was not to make R.A. Dickey look bad, but to make Josh Tolley look good. Because at the end of it, Josh Tolley was no less committed to making R.A. Dickey a great pitcher. Josh, of course, tended to R.A. Dickey for a huge portion of his career. And because he was one of the few guys who could catch R.A.'s knuckleball, which R.A. threw a little harder than most guys, moved a little more than most guys. It was a brutal assignment. And yet Josh Tolley became very good at it, or as good as you could possibly be at it. And there were other parts of it as well, right? R.A. was a bit of an eccentric character, and Josh led him along through that. There was a book written, and Josh spent a lot of time with the author of the book, giving his insights. There was a documentary done called Knuckleball, and Josh showed up 2 or 3 times to allow these documentarians to get video and all. And so Josh was like super locked into RA's career / brand. And Josh had an aunt, and she had a son, and her son tragically was killed in a motorcycle accident. Well, she had asked Josh as sort of time went on, look, I'm a huge Met fan. I'm a huge R.A. Dickey fan. I was just wondering if maybe R.A., I love the book, if R.A. would sign a book for me. And Josh said, yes, of course, I can handle that for you. And, he thought it would make her feel better and all. So he approaches R.A. in the clubhouse and gives him the story. My aunt, I had a cousin die in a terrible motorcycle crash, and it would make her feel great if I could get a book and have you sign it. And according to the story, according to Josh, R.A. turns and says, yeah, you can go buy that at Barnes & Noble. And Josh was just crestfallen. It was funny because in the book, I of course, reached out to RA to say, hey, do you have any memory of this? And he said, no, I never would have done that. So there is some whatever. But I love the story because it just spoke to the fact that, that afternoon, Josh would have caught RA and he would have continued on with his dedication to his craft and to RA's season. And I think it just spoke volumes of what a good backup catcher does. You just, no matter how much gets heaped on you, you just keep showing up.
Yeah, there'd be a couple reached on swinging third strikes for me if I was the catcher that day, or
Yeah. It was interesting because I asked Josh. I didn't cover Josh and RA on a daily basis, and going into that conversation, I said, "So tell me about your relationship with RA." And Josh said, "Yeah, I didn't really have a relationship with him," and I was surprised. I said, "What?" I'd read something completely different along the way, and he said, "No, he shooed me off the mound and stuff and embarrassed me at times." And so I was like, all right, well,
yeah, I mean, it's just another thing with the Mets, like with everything. We get a no-hitter. There was a hit.
It sort of was.
We get a Cy Young 20-game winner. He's a jerk. And like you said, he did deny the story. So let's take it for what it is.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people I've heard comparing, like when I've been reading about this book and stuff like that, they compare the backup catcher to the backup quarterback. I don't really see that because the backup quarterback doesn't really play. Me, it's more the backup goalie in hockey. It's somebody that he's very popular. He's the most popular guy because if the goalie's playing like crap, he does get to play every, so-and-so games. I think it's more of a backup goalie than a backup quarterback.
Yep, totally agree. I've had people say to me, "Oh, like the backup quarterback," and I said, "Yeah, but the backup quarterback never plays, and if he does, it's a complete train wreck."
Especially for the Jets this year.
Oh my gosh! Any year, this year.
Yeah. It's gonna happen.
So, and I also sort of think about the backup catcher in real life, right? All the people who view themselves as sort of living on the crumbs of the original dream. And and perhaps feeling like they're not treated as well as they should be, or paid as well as they should be, or honored as they should be. I think of teachers, people like that who could also sort of grab on to, look, this is what the job is today. I'm going to do it may not be the whole job that I want, but I'm going to do the very best job today that I can do in it.
I think it spoke to me a little bit because correction officers are the backup catchers of law enforcement. We're not cops. Nobody knows what we really do. They think we're walking a tier with a shotgun, and stuff like that. So nobody really knows what our job entails, how much work we put in, how much overtime we put in. I think it kind of spoke to me like that because we are the correction officers and the backup catchers of law enforcement.
Right. And all you can do is take pride in the work you do today, right? And show up tomorrow. I think a big part of the book is showing up. It's just showing up every single day. And that doesn't mean walking through the door. It means being prepared to do the job, knowing that you're not going to have to do the job today, right? And that's playing in the game.
Yeah.
And I was always really interested. I asked a bunch of guys this. I'm like, look, I get being prepared as if you're going to do the job today, tomorrow, for a week, for a month. How do you do it for 20 years, and not cut a corner? But the best of them don't. The best of them show up, and the number one catcher has an earache. Doesn't matter. I'm in. I'm locked in. I know this guy. I've gone through the scouting reports. Let's go. So,
well, they're all. It is tough. You're right, but they're not working for a minimum wage either.
No,
I'm sure he made quite a good living.
He did okay. Eric played in what, 800? No. How many?
Yeah, he had 800, just under 900 at bats.
Right. And so, when he's in the minor leagues, he wasn't making big league money.
No, yeah, okay, fair point. You're right. And it's probably the first team.
It's a relative thing, right? You're sitting next to a guy making $14 million.
Yeah, you're right.
And you're making the big league minimum, and you're all banged up and working as hard as you can just to survive it.
And for these backup catchers, this is definitely the first team they've ever been on where they're not the best player on the team.
I completely agree. And it's funny. This is a lesson I learned early in my career is that you have a tendency to look, let's just say, at the last guy on the roster and think, oh, that guy sucks. No, that guy probably has a street named after him in whatever town he was from. He's the best athlete to ever come out of that town. And he's a big leaguer. He made it to the big leagues. And sometimes that's the whole dream, right? I mean, sometimes guys, not all of the backup catchers are failed number ones or sit there dissatisfied with the way their career come out. Some of them, in AA somewhere thought, oh, if I just bust my butt and kill it and all that, maybe someday I can be a backup catcher. So to some, it's the whole dream.
Yeah, I remember my father told me one time a guy he used to play ball with, whatever, he made it, he got drafted, went to the minor leagues. He said he used to, when he played with them, he used to hit it on the roof every time. He said, but then he get to single A or rookie ball, double A, they all hit it on the roof.
Right. I loved, I asked this question a lot of guys is, at some point, look, they're drafted. To your point, they were great high school players. They might have been great college players if they went to college. Everyone in their hometown is telling them they're the best thing they've ever seen. And one day you wake up in Binghamton or Asheville or Sacramento or something, and it strikes you, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be the next Johnny Bench. And so what do you do with that? You either commit to the best you could do from here or you go home.
Yeah, hey, listen, it's a great book. Listen, you covered baseball long enough. I got a couple quick fire questions for you as far as just baseball goes, stuff like that. All right. True or false? Even if Buckner fields the ball cleanly, Mookie beats him to the bag.
False.
False. Okay. The biggest home run ever hit by a backup catcher was hit by Todd Pratt.
David Ross hit a big home run in a World Series for the Cubs against the Indians. So I would put those two together.
Okay. Shohei Ohtani is better than Babe Ruth.
Shohei Ohtani is the best baseball player in history.
You think he's better than Bonds? Is he Barry Bonds plus he's a Cy Young pitcher? Because Bonds was something.
I don't think he's quite the bat of Barry Bonds. But I think obviously when you throw in the pitching, he's the best player I've ever seen, and I think he's the best player anyone's ever seen.
You think he stays with the Angels?
No.
No.
I think they made a huge. I felt like they made a mistake at the deadline. I think they made a mistake last winter. I think they made a mistake at the deadline before that. Look, I get it. You don't want to be the guy to trade.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But unless Artie Moreno's got $500 or $600 million laying around and has an idea of how to build a team now suddenly after 15 years of not knowing, I think it was a big mistake.
Yeah, but what else would you do to build a team? I mean, you got Trout, you got Ohtani, you got some decent. You picked up pitchers. Like, what else could they do? It's like they're snake bitten. Yeah,
the Angels a long time ago had to pick a lane, right? I mean, they've had 5 or 6 general managers since with Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Or just prior to Mike Trout, they've had a bunch of different managers, and they just can't seem to get it right because they're throwing darts at this thing, and they needed to pick a lane a long time ago and stick with it.
And it was almost funny. They keep Ohtani, they decide to go for it, and they have a week worth of losses right into the back. It's amazing. Okay, so if the Yankees don't fire Buck after 95 season, they still win 4 out of 5.
Man, you know what? I covered those Tory teams. That's a great question. One of the books you threw up there, the Jim Abbott book, Buck Showalter was his manager with the Yankees, and he loved Buck. I'm gonna say that as much as I respect Buck, I think Joe Torre and those Yankee teams were the universe coming together. I think it just worked. Joe had this really incredible touch with those veteran teams, with those egos. And I've never seen anything quite like it. The way those teams came together and won baseball games was unlike anything I've seen.
Yeah, and Torrey was kind of the perfect fit because a baseball manager is not as important as say an NFL coach or anything, but he's got to handle the clubhouse, he's got to handle the bullpen, he's got to and Torrey just seemed to be perfect for that because he wasn't very successful prior to that as a manager.
I think that the sort of an underrated skill for a baseball manager is getting 9 guys on the field every night who want to win a baseball game. And just that, not get my hits, not pad my stats, not anything like that, just win a baseball game. And I think Joe did a really good job of that.
I agree because I could sit from my couch and tell you who should come in the game and who could pinch hit and probably right 8 out of 10 times, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to handle 25 guys. Like you said, one of them making the league minimum, the guy next to him making 20 million. It's a tough task.
Yep.
Favorite ballpark?
I don't know if they're still is San Francisco still AT&T?
I think it might be.
I
Recon Park, whatever they call.
I love that ballpark. I love the little neighborhood it's in. I love the fact that there's a Courtyard Marriott within walking distance. I love the fact that there's like on the walk back to the Courtyard by Marriott, there's a couple bars that stay open a little later. That's just the perfect scenario for me.
And they come from the one of the worst, right? Candlestick was a nightmare.
Yeah, horrible. But yeah, and even especially through those 10, 12, 14 seasons, the ballpark was just alive. It was fun. The teams were really interesting. You
got the boats in the water. They hit them into the water. Yeah, it's great.
It was just cool, man. It's just sort of a really great vibe.
Which one looks great to me is Pittsburgh with the bridge in the background. That looks like a beautiful ballpark.
I do like that ballpark a lot. One of the reasons I liked AT&T is that it was a terrific press box as well. And, if you're asking my opinion, it was comfort and it was, you could see the game. Pittsburgh's very different. It's sort of that blimp view and it's a little tough up there, but that is a great ballpark and a cool neighborhood as well.
Jordan or LeBron?
Man, I got to go LeBron. I just think,
I'm with you.
The size, the strength, Jordan was, I would put him 1-2 for sure. And you could probably convince me Jordan won, LeBron 2, but for my money, I'd go LeBron first.
The worst part about that question is usually when someone gives their answer, they think that, like you say, LeBron. Let's say I was a Jordan guy. I think you're telling me Jordan sucked. But just if you're number 2 all time, I'm not trying to say which one sucked, which one was great. They're clearly both great.
Right.
It's 1 and 1A.
Like the Hall of Fame vote. It's the Hall of Fame vote. You decide not to vote for a guy, and suddenly, people are accusing you of suggesting that someone stunk. Like, no. I think he was great. I just don't. I don't think he was iconic. I don't think he was a Hall of Famer. That's all.
Exactly. I'm a tough grader with the Hall of Famer.
I'm the same, man. Yes.
And I think you could look at someone and you could look at someone and you could, is he a Hall of Famer? If you have to really think about it, he's probably not a Hall of Famer.
I would agree with that. I rarely voted for a guy who didn't get in, which I know sounds goofy, but I never filled my ballot with 10 guys ever. It was usually 3 or 4.
Yeah, and I like that the baseball, it's not, because the NFL, they have the NFL game, the Hall of Fame game. They have to put someone in every year. That might not be the case. The baseball, if there's nobody good enough, don't put him in.
I had no problem with the years that passed without anyone going in. I didn't think anyone deserved to go in.
Fair point. Now, lastly, tell me something interesting about the Yankee dynasty you covered, the team you covered, and the Laker team you covered. There's something that maybe we don't know.
I can connect the two. Okay, so prior to covering the Yankees, I had covered the Angels, the Reds in 97, and then those Yankee teams, 98, 99. And so I went from covering a lot of, and also the Dodgers were in there for a year as well, a Dodger team that went in wild card, 96.
Okay.
And so I had never covered a championship team before. Going to cover the Yankees, and suddenly there was this vibe, you had a bunch of superstars that really came together. It was really sort of fascinating to watch, and you got a sense of what brought a clubhouse together, what won baseball games, and not just, again, to go back to the thing we were talking about with the backup catcher, not just in the 3 hours of the game, but in the 21 hours around the game. And it all just, I finally got it. I said, I understand why, like, you can pepper a roster with guys like Strawberry and Raines and Chili Davis, and still have one goal every night and still just show up and win baseball games. And so I got that. And then I go back to LA to be the national baseball writer. And after about 9 months or so, the Laker writer quit, and they asked me to cover the Lakers just for a couple weeks to get them through. And I said, hey, I don't know a lot about the NBA. And they're like, you'll be fine. So I sort of parachute into this beat. Everybody hates each other. All of a sudden, every conversation was about my ball, my minutes, my team, my money. Everybody had guys around them who would shield them from other guys. And I was like, oh my God, this is never going to work. I just saw how championships were won, and this is not going to work. And they won 3 in a row. And so the lesson was that baseball is not basketball. MLB is not the NBA. It just works different. It's about superstars, and you need those egos in the NBA. It has to be that way. So that was the major takeaway with those two beats for me, is that it doesn't have to be one way, but particularly if you change the sport, then it really doesn't have to be one way.
Even playing the sport itself is different with baseball. I always remember in gym class, just as a small little example, the best football players, the running back, the quarterback, they get up there to swing a baseball bat, and they look like a 3-year-old girl swinging the baseball bat. They just but the baseball players, they could shoot hoops, they could run, they could catch an out pattern. It's just a different sport, baseball.
Yeah, I will say I've seen thousands of ceremonial first pitches. Some of the worst I've ever seen are NBA players. NBA players, boxers are just dreadful. For whatever reason, they're just someone never put a ball in their hand or whatever. They had this other skill, and they're really good at that. But yeah, I would agree with that. I think
they look like you're throwing with your opposite hand.
Yeah, the one thing you lose sight of in covering the NBA, where everyone is somewhere between 6'6" and 7'2", is the fluidity, the grace in which they run and do their skills, right? The way they move on the floor. You just forget that they're 6'10", that they're just monster human beings, because they're all doing it together at the same time.
And they're all the same size. They're all the same size. So
right,
they all kind of look, they don't look as tall.
You don't think about it
huge
until after the game, and to ask a question, you have to look straight up. But because they're so graceful and elegant on a basketball court, you completely forget how big they are.
Does it bother you how much the industry, your industry, as far as a beat writer and a columnist, is changing, and how you're kind of becoming a dinosaur as a,
Well,
not you personally, but
no, you're talking to a guy who got laid off 2.5 years ago.
Yahoo hasn't been the same. Yahoo went full, they just pick up stories here and there. They don't cover baseball as much.
No. It's funny because I have young writers ask me all the time, how do I get started? And I don't really know anymore. I don't, the path that I took, I'm not sure is really available anymore, because there are fewer newspapers, and the newspapers that do exist still don't have the money to invest in someone you think might have a shot at this someday. It's a little confusing. I don't know where the next great sports writers are coming from. Although I will say there are plenty of good ones out there. So I guess they're coming from somewhere, just from somewhere, some other different angle that I haven't seen before.
So now, because I'm fascinated with both of the stories, the Rick Ankiel, which is a wild story, and the Jim Abbott. Which one should I read next?
It's interesting. So I just did an interview about the Jim Abbott story, and it had been 10 years since I wrote that book. And I went back and read parts of it, and I got misty again. I just thinking about him and his parents and his struggles. He's such a quality human being, remains so. We when I was still living in LA, we would get together and play golf still. And it was just, he's just such a good dude and such a great story. I think that, it's underappreciated what he was able to do. It's really still sort of blows me away.
I was telling my wife about it yesterday. I was looking up stuff about it, and I got lost in a Jim Abbott kind of Google search, and I was showing my wife had never heard about him, and I was like, how could you not? I figured everybody heard of Jim Abbott. And then I got to the point, I was like, I completely forgot he got a hit in an RBI, like a line drive opposite field into left center field single. It was great. It's a great story. So, all right, so that's the one I'm going to read, the Jim Abbott story.
And here's the thing. So recently he had an opportunity to do a documentary. And Jim is this very humble guy. And he called me and he said, what do you think? Should I do it? And I said, you don't want to do it? And he goes, I just feel like people are over me. It's like, there's a book out. There was another documentary. And I said, look, Jim, I said, your story is so unique. 100 years from now, they're still going to be playing baseball. And there's still going to be kids like you were. And they're going to want their parents are going to be able to say to him, hey, there was this guy once. Let me show you this documentary, or let me show you this book, or whatever. And we sat down to write that book to talk to one kid. That's all we thought about was there's a kid out there who needs to hear your story. So that's what I think about that stuff all the time and I still get emails, and Jim gets emails from parents and from young men and women who find it to be an inspirational story still.
Well, the book is The Tao of the Backup Catcher. He wrote it with Eric Kratz. His name is Tim Brown, big-time sports writer. Tim, thank you for giving us a couple minutes. I love the book.
Enjoyed it, Bob. Thank you for your interest. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. How about that? Thank you to Tim Brown. Thank you for coming on. That was some good stuff. Listen, it doesn't get much bigger than that. Ken Rosenthal said that is his favorite baseball writer. The only reason that he's not as big a household name as the rest of us because he didn't go on ESPN. He didn't sell out and go to ESPN. But he is as big a writer when it comes to baseball. He covered the Lakers. Listen, he's got great stories. He had great stories, and I love that rapid fire thing where he answered the questions. I still think Mookie would have beat him to the bag. So we'll see about that. So thank you to Tim Brown. Again, thank you for coming on and giving us a couple of minutes. Check out the book. The book is excellent. It's a great book. His other two books I'm reading too. The Jim Abbott one is going to be my next one on the list. But The Tao of the Backup Catcher, it's a great book. You're going to enjoy it. You fly right through it. 200-some pages, you'll fly right through it. No problem. So now we want to welcome our second guest, Frank Russo, former St.Johns tennis coach. We're going to talk about the U.S. Open. U.S. Open, get out to the U.S. Open, people. It's going to cost you a couple of bucks. It's expensive, but get out there. It's a great experience. It will get you interested. Even if you're not a tennis fan, you'll love it. You get the grounds pass. You get to see these world-class athletes up close, front row, second row, in these small little arenas. Or you could go to primetime and see the big names, the names you know, and that's just as good too. But there's an experience for everybody at the U.S. Open. You could, at all price ranges as well. So now let's get to that. Let's get to the preview of the U.S. Open with Frank Russo. Enjoy the interview. Right now we'd like to welcome in our tennis guest as we're going to talk some U.S. Open with former St. John's tennis coach and a good buddy of mine from high school and from forever ago, Frank Russo, Miami Dolphins fan. Frank, what's up, buddy?
How's it going, Bob? 17 days before we kick off and
I know. I haven't watched one play of preseason. Have you? I hate it. I can't watch it.
Yeah, I have just because I can't not watch football if it's on TV. I enjoy it that much. But you got guys fighting for jobs or whatever it is, and I'll turn it on for a half or a quarter.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't watched any of it. I might, if I'm around, if it's on, check out a little bit of the Jets Giants to see what Rodgers is doing. But I mean, I'm lucky. I almost just called him Favre again. I call him Favre all the time.
Yeah, well, let's hope he doesn't play like either guy.
Let's hope he's not stealing like Favre either.
That's right.
But anyway, we got you here to talk U.S. Open. The U.S. Open starts Monday. We told you last year when we had Frank on, it's great. Get out to the U.S. Open. It's great. Now, Alcaraz and Djokovic, they seem to be on a collision course. You might as well skip the rest of the tournament. It looked like a passing of the torch at Wimbledon when Djokovic got beat by Alcaraz. Then last week in Cincinnati, Djokovic in a 3-set thriller. It was a great match, a great final, in which Cincinnati is a big tournament. Djokovic was able to beat him. What do you see going on there? Do you see them on a collision course, and do you think Djokovic can beat him, or has Alcaraz kind of surpassed him at this point?
Well, he wins the second and third 7-6, and he wins the third in the tiebreak in Cincinnati in a very, very well played match. I'm not ready to pass the torch yet. People are just starting, I feel like, to come around to the fact that Djokovic is the best of all time. And I think that goes without question now, to say that Djokovic is best of all time. Alcaraz, I think it's fair to say that it's down to the two of them. I think there's really only 3 or 4 other guys that could beat them in the tournament. Guys that traditionally play well on hard courts or play well at the Open, guys with big serves and like the surface. But, that's a pretty safe assessment that the two of them could be on a collision course, and let's hope so because it's great TV, it's great tennis. Yeah,
the only problem is, and I've said this every year and I'll continue to say until they change it, the final will be played on week 1 of the NFL Sunday and nobody watches it.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you have a point there, but they stagger it because the women are on Saturday and the men are on Sunday. I guess my question to you would be, how do you propose the Open would run it, or
start the damn thing? Start it last week. Push everything back. This is America's major. So I mean, if you have to push the Cincinnati, which I get it's a big tournament, and the other tournament's back a week. You got to do that. I mean, we all get wrapped up in this tournament. Everybody, I get wrapped up in it. People who don't watch tennis really on a regular get wrapped up in it. They will watch the primetime matches. And then all of a sudden you get to the final and you get like Federer, Djokovic back in the day or a great match. And it's at 4:00 on Sunday, week 1 of the NFL playoffs. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'll tell you something else. I mean, for a layman or someone who doesn't go to or hasn't been to the Open, and I think I mentioned this last year to you, I suggest anyone that wants to go to one of the first 4 days. Get a day pass, get yourself a day pass. You can't go into Ash, but no big deal. You sit front row and you can watch two guys or 2 gals, whoever you want to watch. You could sit front row. It's first come, first serve. Mm-hmm. You could watch 2 players, top 30, top 40 in the world, and sit in one of the front rows if you get a day pass, if you're the first person on the court. So, but I agree with you. The scheduling is brutal. The fact that they have the men's final the day of the start of the NFL season, and quite frankly, the weekend before is the start of college football. So
the whole thing,
women's
CBS. What are you doing?
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob.
And how has nobody said anything? It has to be brought up every year. Someone's got to be like, hey, listen, these ratings tank at 4:00 on Sunday of week 1 of the NFL. You don't stand a chance. You could play like
like you said, they would either have to move it up or move it back, right? Probably moving the schedule up somehow. Now I don't know if that means looking to get rid of a tournament. I mean, they're not going to get rid of Cincinnati or anything like that, but nixing a tournament or starting it earlier, there's got to be some sort of way around that to sort of. I mean, there's no justifying really putting it on at 4:00 in the afternoon, the first football.
No, what are you doing? Like who's watching that? And half the time I forget it's on, and I watch the entire tournament.
I'm wrapped up in this. I love it. I love the tennis. I watched the Cincinnati, last week and everything. But anyway, so now as far as the American men go, well, who's to watch with the American men? Is it Tiafoe? Is it Isner's retiring? We'll get to that in a minute. But who's to watch with the American men? Who's going to disappoint us this year?
Wow. Who hasn't disappointed us, right? With the Americans. I mean, yeah, Tiafoe is the guy. He's the guy. I mean, you could argue Taylor Fritz. Fritz got as high as top 5 in the world just recently. He hasn't been playing quite as well as he had been. But as far as Americans go, I think Fritz maybe slight advantage over Tiafoe in the odds, maybe. But it's the two of them, and then I would consider Tommy Paul as well. Who has been playing well. I think those 3 American men are probably due to do the best in the tournament.
Now, the last American, it's the 20-year anniversary of Roddick, who's the last American men. It's just absurd that a sport that we've dominated long before, a long time, decades and decades we dominated. Now we've gone 20 years without a major champion. The last one to really have a solid chance and be within, fingertip distance of it was Isner at Wimbledon. He has announced that he's going to retire this year after the Open. Did Isner live up to his potential?
Oh, that's a good question. Look, I'm not looking to sit here and bash the American tennis players. Isner's a guy. He's always had a huge serve, first, second serve. He could kick it at 140. He can put it wherever he wants. I mean, I don't know. You could argue either way, right? You could argue that he peaked and he was consistently top 20, top 25 in the world for the majority of his career because his serve was such a weapon. On the flip side, you could argue, well, he didn't really have any weapons other than the serve, and he wasn't able to develop, huge ground strokes or beat guys off the ground that way, or win matches on clay where you might have to sit and rally for 20, 30, 40 balls at a time. Isner's always been a grass and hard court guy because of his serve. So I guess you could take either stance on it. Me personally, maybe a little disappointed in Isner's career as a whole. But he has been probably the most consistent male that we've had on the tour in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and his legacy going to be a 5th set tiebreaker at Wimbledon?
Yes.
It is, right?
I think so.
Because he was never gonna crack the top 3 when it was Wawrinka and it was Federer and Nadal and all them. He was never gonna get in there, and he had his shot. And he played that brilliant 5-set match was it Federer? Did he play a 5-set final against Federer?
I don't.
Or am I thinking of Roddick? No. I'm thinking of Roddick that lost the 5-set Federer, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So isn't his, like I said, his legacy is going to be the fact that he played a match that lasted 2 days at Wimbledon, and it'll be the 5th set tiebreak that changed after 100 years of nothing like that ever happening at Wimbledon.
Agreed. I would agree with that. Anytime that Isner's name comes up in the next 20 years, the first thing they'll think about is that 5-set match.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. I remember that. Now you have helped in the last 20 years. You have helped bring some tennis players from college into the pros and whatnot, and we've won nothing. What is the problem with men's tennis? Because the women are fine.
Well, it's funny you mentioned college, because if you think about the top college schools across the country, right? Traditionally, in the last 10 years, let's say again, Florida, Texas, USC, Stanford, Georgia, warm climate places where you can play tennis all year long. I think the number one biggest problem is training and facilities and money, really, funding. because at the end of the day, if the kid is going to go down to Florida and be homeschooled or train down at IMG or one of these academies down in Florida, the parents have to have money, right? Or they need to be getting money from somewhere. And on the flip side, there's only a handful of states, right, to where throughout the year you could play 11, 12 months out of the year. The kids up here in the Northeast, that's not the case, right? There's 5 months out of the year where you can't hit a tennis ball outside because it's too cold or the weather's no good. So I think part of it is the climate, really. And I think part of it is definitely funding. Tennis is, gee golly, off the top of my head, maybe the 6th, 7th most popular sport in the States. I don't know. So whereas these other countries, they're throwing a lot of money at it. They're throwing a lot of training at it.
But
right?
you look at Spain. Spain never had any kind of real tennis program. They had, and then right after, right as the Roddick after he won his thing, Nadal burst onto the scene and he started playing, and then obviously he won a million majors, and now you got Alcaraz, and you got a couple Spaniards that play tennis, and it's not really, they never had a real tennis powerhouse, and now they are.
Right. Well, right. And Nadal has his academy, and Mortaglu has his academy out there, and now they're cooking, right? And now they're cooking. But the thing is that they value their. Well, first of all, this kid Alcaraz he's all worldly. I mean, you watch him play; he plays a physical game. I hate to do this because it's a little early, but he's a right-handed Nadal.
Yeah,
Alcaraz is a right-handed Nadal.
Now I was at. Go ahead.
He plays that same style game. Back on the baseline, grinding guys down. And on the clay, he's nails, just like Nadal, because they grew up on it, right? So, I mean, when's the last time an American won French? Jeez.
It had to be Agassi, right? It had to be Agassi or Sampras.
Well, Sampras, here's the thing. Sampras on Wimbledon was nails, right?
Yeah.
And at the Open, he
won every year. Yeah, he was brilliant at the Open.
On the clay, he was, jeez. I mean, he was average.
Yeah, but Agassi won a couple. Agassi won a couple French, I believe, right? He was good on the clay.
Different games, right? Different games. Pete had a big serve, and Andre's thing. Even though, I mean, obviously as a professional, it is what it is. But Andre, to me, he would have rather taken the ball, served it underhand, and said, "Hey, let's go. Let's grind each other down to the ground."
Yeah, he was more like Jimmy Connors.
Well, Alcaraz plays like that. Nadal plays like that. To a much lesser extent, a guy that's playing now, maybe a guy like Diego Schwartzman. Okay. You're not talking about guys that are 6'5", 6'6", 6'8", like Isner, right? You're talking about guys that are 6 foot and below, maybe even. Or maybe Nadal is 6'1". I don't really know, but you're not talking about guys with 140 mile an hour serves where they're going to hit 25 aces in a match. They're going to have to grind and work and return well and play well off the ground. So I think I don't know. TFO and Fritz are really our guys right now, but quite frankly, they're probably more closer to like the 10th best players in the world versus top 3.
Well, that was it. My question to you was, what's wrong with American tennis? Is the answer nothing? Because we have more top 50 players than any other country. We have 8 players in the top 50, and maybe we just haven't come across that special talent that hasn't come across yet. Is maybe the answer nothing wrong with American tennis? We're doing fine. We got 8 in the top 10, top 50.
I don't think there's another country in the world that
there's not. We have the most. We have the most in the top 50. So you can answer that. Nothing's wrong with American tennis. We just don't have the best in the world right now. The best player in the world.
Right, and your issue, and if we're being honest, we really haven't had a guy that's been top 5 consistently since Sampras and Agassi. Really?
Yeah, because Roddick dropped off.
Yeah, I mean, Roddick won the Open, and but Roddick traditionally was like 10, 12, 15 in the world. he was never consistently top 5 in the world. And at the time he was dealing with guys like Federer, Sampras, Nadal, even Andy Murray when he was playing. So, if you think about the top guys, you really can only name 4 or 5 guys who have been prevalent the last 10 years, right? Roger Federer, Djokovic, Nadal.
You could put Wawrinka, you could put Stan in there, but he was kind of a flash in the pan.
Yeah, and Stan, right? And now he's older, obviously, and I mean, I would put Andy Murray in there prior to him getting injured.
Yeah, but he never beat those guys. He was there.
Well, he
won the Wimbledon. He won the Wimbledon. You're right, but still, Roddick won one. A guy like Roddick or Andy Murray is gonna usually break through one time, win their one major or 2 majors. But you got majors are won by like 3 guys for like a decade. That's how it's been. That's just how the game is.
Agreed. And you know what, my good friend, who's British, Greg, he would love to get in on this, I'm sure, but. I'll tell you right now, and I hate to say it, it pains me to say it, I would argue that Murray had a better career than Roddick.
I could see that. He was there. He was relevant and top 5 for longer than Roddick was. Roddick won that one, and then he kind of dropped. He dropped off, and he was a different player. Roddick was like an Isner type. He'd want to serve you. We just want to hit it past you.
Correct. And if you go to the Open, I mean, chances are that the guy with the big serve is going to win it. So the guys right below Djokovic and Alcaraz that I believe will be there toward the end or have a shot to compete are Daniil Medvedev, who at the Open and on the hard stuff is brutal with that frying pan, with those frying pan ground strokes that he hits. Okay, he's a tough out. Yannick Sinner, the Italian kid, who I believe he's in his early 20s, maybe 22, 23. I'm not positive how old Sinner is, but he's very good, very talented. I would be shocked not to see him in the quarters or the semis at least. And then the other guy is Zverev. Zverev made, I believe, the semifinal and the final 2 years in a row in 20 and 21, maybe. Now here's a guy who, between the years, sometimes you sort of question what's going on. Maybe sometimes when you watch him play, but he's got a big game. He likes the hard stuff, and he seems to play well at the Open. So those are really the only 5 guys that I could see. Because then you turn into guys like Tsitsipas and Holger Rune and Tommy Paul, guys that are sort of like Djokovic and Alcaraz, but like 1.0. Yeah. And I just don't think that they have the games that translate to winning a major. I believe it's a 5-horse race, and in reality, we get lucky to get one of those other 3 guys in it at the end. I believe, and I hope, and I think the majority of tennis fans hope, that it will end up Alcaraz and Djokovic. And I will tell you, that's a final I would watch instead of the NFL.
Well, I was just going to say, I can't wait to watch it scroll across the bottom of the screen of the 4:00 kickoff. So now, real quick, the women have been wide open since Serena left. Let's be real. You had that. Well, who won? What was the girl's name? She came out of nowhere to win Wimbledon. I mean, to win the Australian, right? What was it, Wimbledon?
Were you talking about Iga?
Yeah. No. Iga Swiatek. No. Who was the girl that won? I guess it was Wimbledon, right? She came out of nowhere. Swiatek didn't win Wimbledon. She came out of nowhere. She was like 150 to 1. She came out of nowhere, won the whole thing. Now you got Coco Gauff, who a lot of people thinking maybe it's her time. We all watched her a couple of years ago at prime time. She had an upset. They made it to the second or third round. Now they think it's her time. She has been dominated by Swiatek, but again, back to Cincinnati. Not Cincinnati, the tournament for the women right before. Coco beat her.
Correct.
And now people are saying this might be Coco's time to win.
Yeah, well, I don't know who's saying that, but I'd like to meet them.
Really? You don't think so? I've read a couple articles that say that. You don't think she could beat Swiatek?
No, I don't think she beats Sabalenka either.
Okay. And she's got a tough draw because she's going to meet Swiatek in the quarters. Yeah,
good luck. She's 0 for the world. I don't even know if she's taken a set off Swiatek in 9 matches.
Well, she beat her last week.
So, yeah, Okay, fine. And she won the final, by the way. And she won the final at that Southern and Western Open.
Yeah. Hartford or something, right? Wherever it is.
Right. She won the final. But I don't see it. Not in a major. And truth be told, golf has to get there. So I don't see it. You know what? It is. You're right. It's way more open now that Serena has retired. But if we're being honest, if Ash Barty hadn't retired, I believe that Ash Barty could have had a similar career to Serena. I think she could have been that dominant.
That's going way up. That's asking a lot right there. You think she could have a similar career to Serena? Serena's one of the best athletes America has ever had in any sport.
Yeah, correct. I'm talking about a run like Serena, to where she was winning 2-3 majors a year. I believe Ash Barty could have been that woman for the next 10 years. She retired at an early age. Yeah. I'm shocked she's still retired, to be honest. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up coming back. But I believe she would have been a major problem on the women's side of every tournament that she entered. Swiatek is a little bit less dominant because she doesn't have sort of the weapons that Serena had. Barty, she won a lot of matches just grinding and getting a ton of balls back, but she was nails, Ash Barty.
Serena just overpowered
you. The edge. Correct. I still give the edge to Swiatek. If I had to bet someone to win women's tournament, it would be her. But I think names like Sabalenka. Hey, what about Jessica Pegula?
Okay. You think she can win?
Well, I mean, she's done very well at the Open. She'll be home. She's from, I believe, Buffalo. And she's been playing well. I wouldn't count her out. Ons Jabeur is there, and Rybakina is there. So I don't. I think the men are a little more straightforward. Rybakina won. She won Wimbledon, I believe, in 21 or 22. I believe it was 22. Those 4 or 5 that I named, and don't forget Ons Jabeur. Mm-hmm. Those 4 or 5 I named, I might give the edge to golf. I would put golf at like 5 or 6 on my list of women that can win it this year.
Okay, so
but I would be surprised if she won it.
All right, so give me your 2 winners. Does Djokovic ever get to 25 if he doesn't win this? I mean, he's got to get to 24 first, but does he get to the most majors ever?
Yes.
Okay. You got him winning this tournament?
Yes.
And who's your women's winner?
I do. I'm going to go with Sabalenka.
All right. A little bit of an upset.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Sabalenka on the women's side, and I'll give you 2 for all the degenerates that listen to your
There's a lot of them.
Station. I will give you 2 names, one on each side that are huge odds that I think could make a run in the tournament. Danielle Collins is 75-1 on the women's side. And the name on the men's side is Hubert Hurkacz. You can get it 80-1. So on a $100 bet, if he wins the whole show, you could win $8,000. Those are the 2 total long shots if you wanted to throw a ham sandwich on it to win a bunch of money and just sweat it. Those are the 2 names that I would give you.
Just bet responsibly, because neither of those 2 are going to win it.
Right. Well, the hope is that they make the quarter or the semi, and you could maneuver and hedge now. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. All right. His name is Frank Russo. Me and Frank are going to be out there one day this week. We haven't figured out when yet, but maybe we'll see you out there. Frank, thank you for coming on.
You got it, Bob. Take it easy, guys.
Thank you. How about that? So Frank Russo, he gave you some long shots. He gave you some picks. The Isner thing is interesting, whether he lived up to his potential or not. I think it's a tough question, just like Frank had trouble answering it, because it is a tough question. And American tennis, with the men, I don't have an answer, because we dominated the sport for so long, through so many decades.
and then it just fell off a cliff after Roddick left. And you can't even put Roddick up with the rest of them. Roddick is not Agassi, and he's not Sampras, and he's not Connors, and he's not McEnroe. You know, he was a good player, a top-level player, but he wasn't the major winner and the great talent and the great champion that those other names were. So, but the women are fine. I think Coco Gauff has a better chance than Frank does. He doesn't seem to think she has any chance. I think she does have a chance, and I think, you know, she's an American. A lot of times the Americans get, you know, they get propelled in this tournament, and it is America's tournament, and it's a great tournament, and it's a great watch, and if you're in the area, you can get out there. I suggest getting out there. So, just quick news and notes. Rangers signed Alexis Lafreniere, 2 years, $4+ million. I don't know what took so long for them to get to this deal. Everybody knew that he was going to sign with the Rangers. There really wasn't much interest in him. He's been disappointing. He's definitely been, for a number 1 overall pick, and all the number 1 picks around him, Connor McDavid and players like that, have been better. Lafreniere has been a disappointment. So has Capo Caco for this team. Lafreniere with 39 points last year. Now, this is going to be his make or break contract. This year and next year is going to be make or break for Lafreniere. So I hope that he can kind of put it together. Maybe pick up a little speed. That seems to be his issue. I don't think he's fast enough to really use the talent that he has when he gets to the NHL level. Hopefully he could pick it up. Maybe he gets, with the new coaching staff on there, he gets better opportunities. Maybe he gets more of a chance on a power play. But either way, it's good to see the Rangers have signed him. Like I said, I don't know what took so long. We're about a month away from that getting going. Rangers, Knicks, the whole thing going. So summer, the end of the summer is upon us with the U.S. Open. 2 weeks at the U.S. Open, right into the NFL. Of course, it ends. They play the men's final on the first week of the NFL season, 4 o'clock, which I don't know how stupid you could be over there at CBS and now I guess at ESPN. But it's one of the all-time worst programming decisions that I've ever seen. So, again, just to recap today, we want to thank Tim Brown for coming on. That was a great interview. It was a great spot. He did a great job. We want to thank Frank Russo for coming on, talking some tennis, U.S. Open. Make sure you check out in the description underneath the video, the GoFundMe for Brett's father will be posted. Listen, just give what you can, right? You give $5, $10, whatever you can give. We'll take it. He needs our help. He's asking for our help. Let's help him out, all right? So do the right thing. I will be back on Tuesday with Mark Mancini. We're going to do some NFL. Now we can start getting into the NFL. I just can't bring myself to watch these preseason games. I may or may not turn a couple seconds to try and watch Rodgers tomorrow night, but I just as likely I may not either. I think, but they get good ratings. These NFL preseason games, they're garbage and they get good ratings. So that's going to do it for us here. Thank you for watching, everybody. Again, thank you to Tim Brown. Thank you to Frank Russo. Thank you to you for watching. Thank you to everybody who donates to the GoFundMe down there. I'll talk to you Tuesday, everybody. Enjoy the games. Enjoy the Angels if you're going out there. You know, it sucks that you don't get Ohtani and Trout, but hey, maybe you get a couple wins from the Mets. That does it for me. We'll talk to you next week, everybody. I'm Bob Walters. Thanks for watching. See ya.